Do you need an LLC or a C Corp? Do you need a lawyer or a CPA? We're asking the hard questions, but we're demystifying the answers. Don't change the dial. This is so important for our business. Welcome to Her Power Hustle, Episode 8.
Welcome to the Her Power Hustle podcast with your host, Michelle Talbert. Women are the fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs, yet are the least likely to have a mentor or receive the guidance and advice they need. That ends here today. Her Power Hustle is the power resource for women entrepreneurs like you. So whether you're hustling full-time, side hustling, or gearing up to hustle, get ready for a conversation packed with the information and tools you need to hustle on.
Welcome to episode 8 of Her Power Hustle. Today we have a great show. It's not an easy subject, but fortunately our guest helps to make it easy to understand. We are talking about taxes. We are talking about succession planning, protecting the asset that you are creating, which is your business. And we are really understanding how to protect our business as a solopreneur, whether we're working with partners, what happens after we die, what happens with our business. All of these things are very important. You're sweating, you're hustling, you're making something of value. You have the right, the ability, and now the tools after you hear today's show to make sure that you preserve that asset and that after you're gone, that asset is taken care of in the way that you want it to be taken care of. We are speaking with attorney John Dedon, and Dedon has a gift for breaking down really complex tax issues into bite-sized morsels. And after our conversation with John, I thought about it and realized this is about $500 worth of free legal information that you're getting on today's episode. So it really would behoove you. It is such an important topic. And a lot of times we shy away from it. Our eyes glaze over. We put all of our trust in the hands of CPAs and lawyers, and we may not know what's going on ourselves. So this is a really good way to get at least a 35,000 foot understanding of what you need to have in place at a bare bones minimum to protect your business and to protect yourself and to protect your heirs. So without further ado, here's our conversation with John Dedon. Please head on over to iTunes and drop a review. Again, you are eligible to win a Her Power Hustle t-shirt each week between now and April 15th for dropping a review and sending us the information by email to Michelle, that's Michelle with 2 L's and an E, at herpowerhustle.com, or you can tag me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, put it on the Facebook page, shoot a picture of the review that you're leaving in iTunes, and your name will be entered to possibly win one t-shirt, Her Power Hustle t-shirt per week, and then the grand prize, which is being announced on the show on April 15th, tax day, no coincidence there. We're releasing the basket full of all the goodies, including, if you listen to the financial planning episode 7 with Jaquette Timmons and Jocelyn Wright. Jocelyn's company is giving a full Black enterprise style makeover and wealth assessment, and we have great hair care products from Dr. Miracles, and you can find all of that information on our herpowerhustle.com. And today's episode, you can find the show notes at herpowerhustle.com/succession planning, because this is really great information, and I'll see you on the other side.
Welcome back to Her Power Hustle. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited about today's guest. We are talking about a topic that, as a corporate lawyer, when I was in practice at a big firm, whenever someone had a tax question, our favorite remark would be, we have to check with the tax lawyers on that one. Well, we have a tax lawyer on with us today, and we're really excited about it. His name is John Dedon, and he is a shareholder with the law firm of Odin, Feldman, and Pittleman. He's a tax lawyer with a talent for explaining the complexities of tax law in layman's terms, and that's why he's here. He's really good at putting them into layperson terms. He's adept at estate planning, asset protection, and business, and has practiced for almost 30 years. John, there's no way. You look too good to be have practiced this long. He's been selected among the best trust and estates lawyers in America for a number of years, including 2015. So congratulations and welcome, John Dedon. Thank you for joining us today at Her Power Hustle.
Great to be here, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the spirit of full disclosure, back when I was a semi-junior to mid-level associate in corporate practice, I actually worked with John for a number of years at Odin Feldman and Pittleman, and it was a great experience. I really enjoyed working with John, especially because not only is he a great attorney, and so I learned a lot from him substantively, but he's a great business person, and that's why he's on the call, because number one, being a shareholder in a law firm, you have to have an idea about business because you are running a business. But also as a tax advisor and as an estate planner and with regard to succession planning, you want someone on your team who understands business and then can explain to you what your risks are. So John, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Seems like only yesterday you were here, Michelle.
I know. That's how we know we're getting old, because time is passing very quickly, because I think it's been almost 6 years now since I left. So, yeah, time flies. It really does, which means also we're having fun, so that's good. So, John, I have to start at the very basic. Our sister power hustlers who are checking us out, and from the emails I've been receiving, we have some brother power hustlers checking us out too, so welcome, fellas. Why would an entrepreneur need a succession plan? And I guess, let me even back up. What is a succession plan? What is a succession plan from the perspective of a business owner?
Well, a succession plan can be different things. At the personal level, it's simply knowing that the business value is being preserved for spouse or children or whatever beneficiaries you have in mind. You need a succession plan so that the business can be preserved for your employees as you develop the business. And you need a succession plan that's orderly so that the IRS or the state doesn't come in and deplete the value because of taxes or administration costs.
So these are all, you're very much a specialist when it comes to asset protection. And so I guess that would fall into the category of protecting your assets after you're gone, making sure that you have put mechanisms in place for that.
Yeah, there can be a number of ways that your assets are lost. Taxes can be one, probate costs can be another, creditors can be another. So it starts with what's the appropriate entity to create the business, what are the essentials to have in place as I grow the business, and then from the estate side on the personal level, it's what's the most efficient way to preserve it and pass it down or have it in a position to sell.
So now let's say that, a number of our listeners are what we call side hustlers, folks who are still doing their day job, but all around the day job, they're working on their passion or their baby. So, they're entrepreneurs at the wee hours of the morning, late at night, the weekend warriors. Would they also benefit from having a succession plan? Is there a point at which you really need to sit down and say, okay, let me put together a plan?
Well, in some ways, the legal side is a necessary evil, because if you're starting a business, your focus is on developing the business, the customers, bringing in the revenue. The last thing you want to think about really is a complicated succession plan. Mm-hmm. So my advice would be you do need a lawyer and an accountant to at least know what's the appropriate entity. Is it a corporation? Is it an LLC? But once you get the basics in mind, you should prioritize your goals so that you can focus on what's most important and evolve into the next level of planning as it develops and you have the resources to pay for it. But I certainly wouldn't go very far in this process without having the blocking and tackling in place, which would be the appropriate entity, as I said. And in some ways, your CPA will be more valuable than the lawyer, because once the lawyer gets you up and running, it's then the CPA who's going to help you out with the taxes and the compliance issues.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was actually definitely one of the things I wanted to touch upon, the difference between sort of having a CPA on your team and having a lawyer on your team. When most folks hear that they need both on their team, they get, worried about cost especially. So that's good that you made that distinction in terms of what the roles are and understanding the different roles of how the CPA and the lawyers work together.
Right. And whether you're a business owner or not, on the estate side, you should have a will, a trust, a power of attorney, a medical directive. Those are fundamental documents for anyone. It's simply that the business owner owning an interest in a closely held business has an overlay of complication in dealing with that asset, in addition to an IRA or a life insurance policy or equity in a home.
Mm-hmm. And you as an attorney can help them through that process?
Correct. On the estate side, it starts with those core documents, and then on the business side, it starts with what's the appropriate entity, and if you're in it with a partner, then an important aspect of that as well is a shareholders agreement, so that it sets forth clearly what the relationship is between you and your partner.
See, this is why I don't even have to ask the questions. I love my guests. You exactly hit on the next question, and I'd like to just expand upon it a little bit more. You touched upon it, but really the difference between having a solopreneur and endeavor versus having a business partner, how important it is then to really have legal representation when you have a partner in place in your entity. Can you just speak a little further to that as well? You touched on the shareholder document.
Yeah, so if it's your own business, obviously, you're free to do with that asset as you wish. But if you're in business with a partner because you share resources or you complement each other, whatever the reason is, then it becomes significantly more complicated, and that's where the shareholders agreement comes in. So what's the purpose of the shareholders agreement? Michelle, assume if you and I had a business together and I died, you may like my wife, but you don't want to be in business with her because she's at home. She's not with you and me every day. So there needs to be a mechanism so you can operate the company without my wife's input. From her perspective, she's not interested in the business. She just needs to know that the value of what you and I have built together is protected so that it's available for her and our children. So the way that you deal with those issues is the shareholders agreement that provides, typically upon death, the surviving partner is required to purchase the interest of the deceased. And the deceased spouse, the estate, is required to sell it. And then you get to, well, where's the money coming from? Often the money's coming from a life insurance policy on our lives. And then you get to issues such as, well, what happens if the insurance doesn't equal the value of the stock because we can't afford it? And then the answer is, well, there can be payment terms to make it agreeable both for the continuation of the business and for the deceased family. So that's the issue that's addressed in a shareholders agreement upon death. You also want to address issues such as, Michelle, I may decide I want to leave, and then you perhaps would say, well, best wishes, but I don't have the money to buy you out, so I don't have to purchase your shares, and I may want to compete now with the business, and that's not fair, so there may be provisions to prohibit me from competing with you in a venture that you and I started together. So all of these issues are addressed in a shareholders agreement, and it shouldn't sound overwhelming to the audience because obviously this has been done over and over before.
Right.
And so it begins to follow with the tailoring of the individuals a kind of a checklist of important items to address.
And I have to say, one of my favorite clauses in these types of agreements are called a non-disparagement clause, which means that if we split, you cannot go out in the world and talk ill of me out there in the world without me coming to get you. So I do, there are things that you can put in place that maybe when you're in the honeymoon phase of a partnership, you're not necessarily thinking about, but really can protect you if you have good representation at the outset, and you don't have to worry about these issues later on when you need to unwind. Can you talk about, with regard to an agreement like that, or with regard to succession planning, when you have multiple partners, more than one person in the business, as a shareholder, who should be representing the entity? In other words, should each person have their own legal representation? How does that work?
Well, I think there's a practical and there's an academic answer to that. The academic answer is if there's you and me and our company, the attorney should represent the company, and then we would each have our own attorney. But the reality is that very seldom is going to happen because in a startup, there's simply not enough money available to do that. So there's normally one attorney, and you kind of waive conflict issues, and the attorney's acting on behalf of all of the parties. And if you do it from the beginning, then you have a recipe for success. You mentioned you do this during the honeymoon period. That's exactly the time to do it because when issues develop subsequent to the startup, it's harder to then go back and address them. When everyone's on an equal footing starting out, that's the time to go through the checklist of what's important. So just because of the allocation of resources, it's typically one attorney who's setting this up at the start. Certainly, Michelle, if you fast forward and there's a disagreement between the parties, it's impossible to have one attorney at that point because each one will have their own. It's really no different than a marriage and a divorce. You're starting at the beginning when people are all in agreement, and that's the way to go. The tension there is, well, how much money do I have to devote to attorneys? I'm trying to get my business off the ground.
Mm-hmm. John, do you have thoughts? There are more and more firms. I know definitely this rolled out years ago in Silicon Valley. There are more law firms that at the outset of the startup are taking an equity position, as opposed to having a large outlay of legal fee cash by owners. Do you have any thoughts about that sort of take on an arrangement with regard to payment?
I don't really have any thoughts about it. I know in the old days that you allude to, I heard more of that going on. I don't hear as much of it going on now. On one hand, I guess you could say the attorney's supposed to be totally objective, independent, and perhaps some of that is sacrificed if you have an equity interest in a company. But anecdotally, I know it's been done in the past, and I guess it's been done to success. Mm-hmm. So our firm hasn't done that, but that's not to say there's not a model out there where it can work.
I know that you represent, high net worth individuals, but you also represent people who are sort of, mom and pop. So for someone who's listening and they're hearing you're talking about these documents, are there flat fee models out there? Are there ways that they can sort of allay their fears when it comes to cost for these types of documents?
The answer there is it depends. On the estate side of things, virtually everything I do is flat fee. So clients do know what the cost is for the product and the needs that they have. And by the estate side of things, I mean a husband and a wife or a single person needing the wills, the trust, the powers of attorney, medical directives. That's a flat fee. It gets harder to do a flat fee when you get into some of the corporate documents beyond the initial incorporation. Incorporation is fairly simple, but take a shareholders agreement, for example. If you have multiple parties with multiple objectives and perhaps more than one attorney, then it's not simply in the control of one person and there's a back and forth. So the answer to your question is some things lend themselves to flat fees. Other issues, such as multiple parties or litigation, employment issues with different attorneys, those things are typically done by an hourly.
So what our audience will start to recognize is a theme that every time we have lawyers on the show, the words "it depends" ultimately pop up. It's impossible for them not to at all. So, we'll go with that. So
I've only used it once so far, though.
I know. I'm proud of you. And we're almost finished with the conversation, so you did really good, John. You really did. What's the difference between you? Let's stay with cost for a while, because I know my audience and I know that, we're hustling. And hustle means counting every single penny and really ensuring the protection is there, but at the best, most efficient cost. What is the difference between going online and printing some forms for free and coming to you? Where's the value added that you bring to the table?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. I haven't gone online, look at wills or trusts or incorporation packages. I'm sure, or maybe I should say I assume they work, and people have used them. I think what the lawyer brings to the table is beyond the four corners of a document. If you don't have the perspective of doing this regularly, it's hard to know what questions you should even ask, much less the ramifications of what you're doing. So having a document may be a document that gets you up and running, but it may not prepare you adequately for the nuances that develop as you operate your business or as you do your estate plan. I think it's really that perspective and putting things in the proper context that a lawyer can help, assuming it's more than a simple will, for example. And Michelle, here's an example.
Okay,
people do a will and they say, well, this is easy, I'm going to provide for my spouse and my children, so that's what the will says. But they haven't considered that all their assets are jointly titled, or they have beneficiary designations. So assets that are jointly titled go directly to the joint owner. Assets that have beneficiary designations go directly to the beneficiary named. So that will that they did is really irrelevant because nothing will pass under the will. So if they have a second marriage and are concerned about protecting their spouse but making sure the assets don't end up with a new spouse rather than their descendants, that will isn't even coming into play. If they have kids and they're worried about the kids getting divorced, but everything's just gone outright because of title or beneficiary, that will doesn't come into play. So how all the pieces fit together can be missed simply because they don't have the perspective on the different objectives that they have that they should be addressing.
Yeah, I that makes absolute sense. And So for folks listening, I understand forms can sometimes be cheaper, but, you get sometimes really what you pay for. And this is an area that you can sort of set it and forget it until things change a bit, right, John? Folks can make sure that they have the appropriate documents in place and then just only have to reach back out in terms of a change in their life, typically, right?
Yeah, you mentioned I've been doing this over 30 years, so I'm now at the point where I'd say probably 25% of the people I see are clients who have been around almost that long, and after 5, 10, even 15 years, they come back and they say, I want to change my executor, my trustee, my guardian, I had a death of a spouse. So it's not as if I see them constantly, but as things do change, you do updates, and it's typically now, as I mentioned, in that 5 to 15 year period that I see it. Unless they have an ongoing business, then there's routine and regular legal work that's done on behalf of their company.
And this is one of the reasons, folks, why John is on the call again, because John is a business person and he's very prudent and he's not wasteful with his own money and would definitely not waste yours as well, and it's going to always be honest and sort of shoot from the hip about options. So further to that, John has a few videos that we're going to put on the site. They'll be available. All of the resources will be available at herpowerhustle.com/succession planning, and you can find all of the information there that we're discussing. But, John, you have a really great video that we're going to have on the site as well about what folks should be prepared to bring with them before they meet with you. Can you give us just a couple of highlights in terms of before you go to meet with a trust and estates attorney? What are some of the things you should bring with you or have thought about or to put those pieces in place? I know you tell folks they don't have a lot of homework to do, but what are some things that they can do before sitting down with you?
Well, you're exactly right. I do tell people they don't have a lot of homework. In the old days, I would work with a form that was several pages, and I think it was more overwhelming and intimidating than helpful. So I think what's important is really just the process of sitting down and meeting with the people. That's how you learn what's important, what they want to accomplish, and through the conversation, the information comes out. But having said that, from the client's perspective, I think they should be thinking fundamentally at the first step, who do they want the assets to go to? Are they married? Is there a child or children? Are they taking care of parents? So the first thing is simply, where do the assets go? Roughly, what are the assets? For people with a house and a retirement plan and life insurance and other liquid assets, that's typically it. Michelle, for your audience, the overlay may be stock in a company. It's the business interest, so that has to be considered. So a ballpark figure of what the assets are, what they're worth, and how they're titled is important. And again, I emphasize a ballpark figure. This isn't necessary for precise dollars. And then you get into, well, in addition to where the assets go, what am I concerned about? I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are concerned that the inheritance for their children stays within the bloodline and doesn't end up with a former daughter-in-law or son-in-law. So you get into issues like that. I have clients with children who have special needs. Is a special needs trust necessary in order to make sure that the inheritance is not depleted by the government, that the government resources are still available? So you then talk about objectives, and then finally you get to, well, who's going to be in charge of all of this? Because if you have 1 or 2 kids and they're 40 years old, well, the answer is often the kids. But if there's minor children, you need a guardian until they're 18. You may need a independent trustee to help manage it. So those are the types of things at kind of the basic level to think about, and that we then explore during the conversation. The overlay is the estate tax and eliminating probate, and that's really my responsibility to give guidance on those issues.
What do you think is the biggest mistake anecdotally that you've seen in your 30 years of practice? I still can't believe this is because you work out every day. You work out every morning, right? 5 days a week? How many days a week? Because it's working for you.
I'd say I try to do something at least 5 days a week.
Exactly.
Rest is important too as you get older.
That's true. That's true. Very true. So you take your afternoon naps. So in terms of looking at the biggest mistake that you see small business owners make, is there one thing that rises to the top as a recurring theme when people come to you and say, John, I should have done blank, and now can you help me fix it?
Well, I'd say two things from the perspective of estate planning and business owners. The first is I should have done something. So it's easy to understand, whether you're a business owner or not, that you don't intend to die tomorrow, and you don't therefore have an urgency to put things in place when your priorities are everyday life and building a business and your family. So the first thing is a lot of times things just don't get done. Anecdotally, you can see famous people who died and didn't have things in place. But the second thing is those who have done what they thought was necessary, such as a revocable living trust to avoid probate so that things, assets pass orderly, they then don't do the second step, which is funding the trusts. Or they begin to create things, but they don't have the assets titled properly. So a lot of times the effort to do the basic planning is there, but then people get exhausted and don't do the second stage, which is kind of the implementation of placing the assets where they need to be.
Well, this feeds into my next question, John, and maybe you've answered it already. And what is the number one tip that you would give folks as a takeaway from this conversation then, in terms of ensuring that they have the pieces that they need in place? What's sort of the first thing they should do or be thinking about? What's your biggest tip for them?
My biggest tip, once they've embarked on what is essential to them as a business owner, is then meeting with somebody like me so that the cart is not too far in front of the horse, and getting the documentation in place to protect themselves. And the documentation, as I mentioned, is typically a will, trust, power of attorney, medical directive, and for the entity, I'd say about 70% of the time it's an LLC entity for liability protection and ease of management.
And that's a limited liability company.
Correct.
A structure.
Which is serves the same purpose as a corporation, but it's more flexible to work with. And most companies starting out these days, the LLC will work just fine. I'd say in second place would be a corporation set up as an S corporation, which is a pass-through entity. And then you may see a few what's called C or regular corporations these days. But the bottom line is those basic documents in an LLC gets your business owners up and running.
Right. Right, and as we talked about at the top of our time together in terms of the CPA and the lawyer working together to make sure that you have the documents in place that protect you, as well as have a structure that you deem necessary and prefer for your interest as an entrepreneur. So that's really great. Well, thank you so much, John. Do you have any final parting words for our guests? I mean,
No,
for our
I
audience.
come back to kind of a reoccurring theme, I think, Michelle, which is I certainly understand this is not perhaps the most enjoyable task for business owners. And so you want to be with somebody who's mindful that it's important to get it done, but can also help the business owner prioritize the legal needs with the resources of the company so that the company can be successful and grow without being overrun by legal costs.
And, the great things, listener, about John is that, we're doing this episode during Women's History Month, which, we're focusing on money all month for Women's History to really make sure that we have our ducks in a row financially with regard to our businesses. And John is absolutely right in terms of thinking through making sure that you have the pieces in place to protect you and having the right people on your team, because we're stressed out enough with all the balls that we're juggling in the air with regard to family and all the other responsibilities that we have. So to have someone on your team who, yes, you're paying a fee to, but as John mentioned, a lot of the documents, especially on the personal side, are flat fees, so you know what your costs are and you can have an idea about those costs. But the stress level that it takes off of you is probably immeasurable with regard to a dollar amount. It's something you don't have to worry about, thinking about I should be doing, because it will have already been done, and it will have been done well because you have a trusted professional helping you. So, John, I really appreciate you taking this time. I have one last question for you, sir. You ready? Because it's the toughest one that I ask.
Fire away.
Okay. I need you to tell me your favorite movie or song about love or romance, and it's any kind of love or romance. Movie or song, go. I should play the Jeopardy music or something. See if I can get licensing rights for that.
Wow.
And now, here's today's Her Power Hustle Power Boost.
Hello there, lovelies. This is Crystal Tingle with The Love Jump, my personal blog about love, faith, sex, and culture. You've heard it before. Do what you love. But what I want to know is, what about loving the one that you're doing it with? You see, I'm on a personal journey to meet that one, and I hope that you'll join me at thelovejump.com. Here's a tip I've learned all along the way of love jumping. I ask myself, where's the love? Whether I'm working or in a personal relationship, if I'm stressed out or having a good time, where's the love? If you can find the heartbeat of your hustle, the heartbeat of your hard work, then you're on the right path. But if you ask yourself, where's the love, and you can't answer it, you might want to take a step back and adjust. Because after all there really is love. Take a break from the hustle and join me at thelovejump.com for all things love, faith, sex, and culture. Happy hustling, lovelies.
Thank you, Crystal. And now back to John's answer.
You ready? Because it's the toughest one that I ask.
Fire away.
Okay. I need you to tell me your favorite movie or song about love or romance. And it's any kind of love or romance. Movie or song, go. I should play the Jeopardy music or something. See if I can get licensing rights for that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You didn't see that one coming at all.
No, I didn't. So I'll go with Springsteen. If I fall behind, I'll wait for you.
I love it. I love it. And we will have a link to that song on the show notes at herpowerhustle.com/succession planning. John Dedon, thank you, sir. Tell people how they can find you. I will have links to your contact information for those of you who are listening and you're on a treadmill or in a car and don't have access to a pen or a pencil. Of course, you can always go on the website, herpowerhustle.com/succession planning, and get this information for those of you who do have a pen and pencil. John, tell them where they can find you.
Michelle, probably the easiest thing to do is just Google my name, which is Dedon. I have a blog, as you mentioned, Dedon on estate planning, and that can get them to an address and a phone number and email and everything else.
Okay. Well, good stuff. We'll have all that on the show notes as well. John, thank you for taking the time. I hope you enjoyed this moment of being able to get back to your basics. Sometimes you're up there, talking about really, really big topics. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us so that we can help our listeners grow and develop into the amazing sister power hustlers that they are.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you inviting me on the show.
Absolutely, Dedon. Thank you so much.
Told you that would be painless, and it was, right? Great information from John. I think my biggest takeaway is really that once you do something at the outset, it's almost like insurance. You put these pieces in place that protect you, your business, give you peace of mind, and then you can move forward knowing that you don't have to touch it again for a while until there's some event. And that's a great thing. It's an investment worth making for the peace of mind and ability to move forward knowing that your assets are protected, knowing that the wealth and value that you're creating will be dispersed in a way that you feel comfortable with and of your choosing as opposed to the choosing of the state or any other entity. John is really approachable, so I really would suggest that you reach out to him, give him a call, reach out to him, check out his blog, because he really is great about just saying things in a very plain way. And he's very approachable. So like I said, he works with high net worth individuals and he works with mom and pops and solopreneurs. And he gets it. He understands where we are in our journey as entrepreneurs. I appreciate you coming and hanging out with me on this episode. If you enjoyed the show, please don't keep Her Power Hustle a secret. In some ways, we're becoming like the best kept secret that people keep saying, wow, I didn't know you had such great information. So if you enjoyed it and you know someone else who you think can get value from the show and the information that we share on the show, please share the episode. Please share the show. We would love to have more listeners and to learn more. Also, if you would be interested in having your business highlighted, as you see, every week I highlight a different business through the Power Boost, and they give information, and the information is also on the show notes for that episode. If you would like to have your business highlighted, shoot me an email at michelle@herpowerhustle.com, or you can leave a voicemail message on the website or on the Facebook page for Her Power Hustle. I look forward to finding out who's getting a t-shirt for our next episode. I'm looking forward to bringing our next episode to you. I think you're going to love it. We're continuing our talk about money. Money is that serious that we are devoting this many episodes to it and talking about all the different facets and ways to protect your money as you are out here hustling hard, girl. I understand. So without further ado, we're going to wrap it up for this week. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Her Power Hustle. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Her Power Hustle podcast, produced and hosted by Michelle Talbert, with voiceover talent by Sean Belton and music by Taman Hade. All of the resources discussed on this episode can be found on the Her Power Hustle website. That's at herpowerhustle.com.